For more than 30 years, U2 has been a dominating force in music. Some things never change, like fans lining up overnight for a glimpse of band members.
Just signed my sunglasses, Bono.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
U2's the best thing about me.
Thank you so much. We can't wait for her. I'm the person that misses you for 30 years by 5 minutes. Could you
glad
sign?
to finally get there.
Thank you.
I met up with Bono and longtime guitarist The Edge as they kicked off their 14th world tour.
The security guard was saying to me, he was like, no one spends this much time with fans.
Well, we normally see them more.
How is this different than other shows you guys have put on?
We wanted to make really biographical music about the details of our life growing up, what it was like to be Irish in the 70s and 80s, what it was like to go through being famous and what it does to you. And we thought, could we really do this like a movie, except it's moving city every few days? So we went backwards and told the story of how we got here. And now at this show, we're going into the future with a lot of optimism and hopefully some wisdom.
I think having spent a lot of albums talking about global issues, and the really radical thing would be to turn the other way. I think Bono did an immense job with the lyrics, because it's very hard to write about such personal things without it being kind of sentimental,
annoying,
and emotional. But
vomit-inducing.
it's sort of the ability to write about it in a kind of cool, objective way gives it power.
It's part biography, part politics, all amplified by a giant double-sided screen dubbed the Barricade. It's placed center stage, so there's no bad seat in the house. It's extraordinary tech, and it's also the basis for a new component, augmented reality, meant to kick off the beginning of Experience and Innocence, a follow-up to their last tour, Innocence and Experience. Show architect Rick Lipson says the tech is meant to showcase the theme of mortality.
5 or 6 minutes before the show starts, you will hold your phone up, you'll see the iceberg melting. And this is a very intimate moment with Bono.
One of the interesting parts of the show and the augmented reality experience is it's all kind of this experience about mortality too. I read you said somewhere being a rock star is being immortal. It certainly seems like in the last years you're grazing the earth a little bit.
Well, people think they're immortal, don't they? When every teenager does, I did, and then you join a rock and roll band, you're sure you're immortal kind of thing. And then you discover you're not. But it was just interesting to share, to try and have the courage to share those fears and those anxieties.
The show is personal, with the goal of creating a sense of intimacy with the audience. It's a concept artists are struggling with in the era of smartphones. It's the modern-day tech dilemma. If we're watching from a screen, are we really present?
We call it judo, using the force of what's coming at you, to defend yourself against it. Phones can be a real problem for artists. We think, don't tell your audience what to do. It's like, allow them to use it whatever way they want, but try to be creative with it.
None of this innovation would have been possible without the team behind the scenes. Working alongside architect Lipson, there's stage designer Willie Williams, who's been with the band since 1982, and S. Devlin, whose other clients include Adele and Beyonce.
Willie and I and Rick have been, debating this issue of will we involve the audience and their portable film studios in our story or won't we? And we've been debating, I'd say, for the last 5 years.
If people are going to look at the show through their phones, let's give them something to look at that's part of the narrative.
What do you want people to get about this particular show?
They need to remind themselves that they're human, actually. They need to remind themselves that they're sitting next to each other in a group, feeling music together. I think focus, togetherness, congregation, I want them to take that away. That's becoming really, really precious, isn't it?
There's this narrative that tech has divided us further, that we are completely moving farther into our own filter bubbles.
What makes humans more interesting is the friction of opinions that don't agree with ours. So I'm a little concerned about that kind of bubble, where you just hear your own voice and you're just fed the stuff that you like. But even in music, you've got to be careful that algorithmically, if you're streaming U2, you'd like to think that Spotify can put you in touch with other music that's been touched by U2 or that U2 touched. And I get excited by that.
Bursting their own filter bubble led the band to open their tour in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
You guys are a notoriously liberal band. There were a lot of political images in there that I can imagine might not sit well in a place like Tulsa. Why the decision to open here in such a politically charged show?
We're very issues orientated, so we don't apologize for taking a stance on issues, but we do believe that you can address issues without necessarily making it partisan politics. And so, this is, for us, the heartland of America. We accept there are differences in the way people see things here than maybe in New York or LA, but we're open to that. We want to hear the arguments. I mean, I think we're, as a band, comfortable with differences of opinion.
While the show's narrative is deeply personal, following the band's transition from humble beginnings to global superstardom, it's nearly impossible to miss the overt political messages woven into the story.
I'm staring at the sun. I'm not the only one who's happy to go blind.
You take on the women's movement and gun violence. There's imagery of Charlottesville. What message do you want people to take away?
I don't like the caricature of conservatism. I don't like the leader of the Conservatives right now. I don't know, there's a lot of Conservatives who don't like the leader, and I don't want to even use his name. But I have a deep respect for conservatives and conservatism, and I've found them to be great allies in the fight against extreme poverty at the One campaign, or supporting Red.
Is it hard to maintain your humanity when this level of fame has catapulted you into the ultimate
Oh, it's the
filter
opposite.
bubble?
No. It's the thing that nobody knows about being famous. You think that it explodes your ego. The opposite happens, it implodes. And, I think over time, when you meet people who've been in interviews and done what we do, you can kind of see that something inside of them has withdrawn. It's a funny one, fame.
In what sense?
It's corrupting.
The fact that we're in a band helps enormously, because we're able to sort of see what is happening reflected in the other members of the band, and you sort of can catch yourself if you realize that you're losing it. And it has happened to us all at different times, I think, during the life of the band, that our perspectives just got a little off. So keeping it on track, that's really what it's about, and knowing what's important.
It's clear from the show, which depicts both Bono and The Edge's children throughout. Much of that perspective comes from family.
One of the ultimate disruptors that changes everything is children. I'd be curious to know how your children changed you.
That's some extraordinary software.
Well, I think
those kids.
I think when you have kids, it reboots your whole attitude to global issues and to what's happening, because you suddenly realize that whilst you can be totally selfless personally, when you have a child, you can't think like that.
Look no farther than this show as a really introspective look at your lives and your success and your children and everything you've built up until this point. How do you want to be known?
Well, I think artists are simultaneously very self-obsessed and selfish, but also they're trying to grapple with the big questions, and I think our work really speaks the most eloquently. I think if the songs are famous, I'm happy. I think they speak better than I could ever about us and what I'm about.
A good father would be good. Good partner, good mate would be good. And that you wrote songs that you could never live up to, but that they had their own life and that they served your audience well.